Hello, listeners. It's great to be back in the studio today. Hi, Kathryn. How are you?
Hi, Grace. I'm doing great. Yes, it feels so good to be back. It's exciting and comfortable, and it's really nice to be with the listeners again.
It does feel great. We have had a little bit of a gap here. We have actually been recording frequencies. So, for whatever reason, Clovistia was showing us frequencies, and our producer, Charlie, was producing those frequencies. And those are some of the last things that we have been posting on our podcast, because apparently some of you out there needed to have these frequencies, whether you know it or not. Otherwise, they won't be shown to us. Nothing that they show us is for no reason. There's a reason behind everything. So I hope those of you that needed those healing frequencies have had a benefit out of it. And for those of you that haven't listened to them, maybe take a few minutes to go over there or go to our YouTube page. Our producer has created a YouTube page for us, and it's got all kinds of frequency. It's got the past lives that have been created into videos, which is a whole new experience for everybody. So stop by and visit and share your comments.
I have really enjoyed those frequencies, so I really encourage the listeners to go over there. I think Charlie did a fantastic job putting all of that together.
Well done, Charlie.
Yeah.
Because we read all of our comments, I know that other platforms might not do it, but we do. We read all of our comments. We kind of pay attention to what the emails are talking about or asking about. So recently, there have been a huge number of emails related to this idea of maybe being earthbound. And since I always share with you my own personal experiences, I have to share my experience associated with learning what earthbound is. If some of you are following my personal story here on the podcast, you will know that in the beginning, when I met Katherine, there was something that we had to do, but we didn't really talk about what we did. So this is how I met Katherine. And listeners, you never know what spiritual doors are going to open for you and what experience that will lead you to. And so this episode is about that experience.
Oh, I remember that one very well.
It was my very first little spiritual experience where I actually interacted with the other side, and it brought me to your door.
Yes, it did. You were a young searcher at that time, and you were really looking as to what a spiritual life meant. It was just in the beginning of your journey, and you had a big problem.
Understatement with the big problem. And I had no idea that the day that I was going to walk through the door with Katherine was going to be life-changing.
It was the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
Yes, it was.
You were just in your beginning of your journey to enlightenment. And what I want to comment about is the fact that you came with an open mind and a very strong desire to explore. You were in such, what do I want to say? You were in such a need to understand, to know what was going on. What was your purpose in life? What was happening to you? And what our listeners need to understand is that Grace came to me with a true desire, with an open mind and an open heart. If that had not been the case, I would not have taken her on this journey. This is not something to play with. And so I'm going to let her take it from here as to what her experience was.
Thank you very much for giving a little warning to our listeners that, you know, the bad music is going to start playing in the background now because
Well, I don't want people to think that they can go in just for fun, because you don't want to open Pandora's box without some guidance, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I had this situation where someone close to me had passed away. She was the mother of a very good friend of mine. And when she passed over, one of the last things that she said in this life was my name. She was actually calling my name when she passed over. Of course, all the family members were looking at me and asking, why is she saying your name and not our name in her final moments? What does that mean? They looked to me for answers, but I had no idea why she did that. And I was a young person in age and in spirit. I had my death experience, which you did not know anything about at the time. And I didn't know that this experience would launch me into a spiritual path in such a huge way. So it was a very changing moment for me.
Well, you know, those very first steps can be very scary. Are we going to play the music again?
Yeah, we might have to start the music again.
Yeah.
Ramp it up.
And many people get afraid and they won't look any further because they're too scared of what's behind the curtain. What they don't understand is when you look behind the curtain, you find a lot of peace, you find answers. And so you were willing to dive in. And I think it's a good time to remember that this was a great deal of courage you had to go in, plunge in, and tell us what that was for you.
You know, after my friend's mom passed away, it was about 2 to 3 weeks. And one day I noticed that different family members began to share with me that their mom was coming to them in dreams and asking and begging for help. The family was getting progressively freaked out. Individually, different family members began to call me independent of each other and trying to ask what was wrong with mom and did I know what was happening since she called out my name. I had no idea. And I thought, oh gosh, over the course of time, it went on and on over the course of the year. And then into 2 years, the dreams continued and the family became full out panicked how we were going to help mom. Through the course of the day, they would be, their mind would be pulled away from their regular activities so they could think about how to help mom. And the dream was repeated over and over with very little change. And all of the family members were getting involved.
So what was she doing?
She was standing on a low hill, holding out her hands, asking for help. Like holding her hands out, pleading. The family had become so traumatized with despair trying to help her. They decided to launch a campaign of prayer. She's a Muslim lady, so they had already been praying, but now they were going to get really specific with their prayers, and they were going to do it all throughout the day, and they were going to sort of form a prayer posse and make an effort to solve this problem with prayer. Pray, pray, pray. That's all they talked about. But it really wasn't helping mom.
That must have scared everybody.
Yes, it did, and including me. I was afraid too because I thought, what if I do something wrong? I didn't have any experience in this area, and I didn't know. But one Sunday, I was invited for dinner. And when I arrived, I was the only guest. I ate and sat down for tea, and soon the entire family was gathering around me, and they had only one question. How do we help mom? I didn't know. They felt that her saying my name in the final moments had some kind of meaning. I really didn't have any clear answers, but it makes sense that I should be doing something. Then I had a visit from her myself, and that kind of changed things. She came to me in the dream, the same as she had been doing to all the family members. And let me tell you, this was a very, very vivid dream. I could see why it scared the family so much. I could see her standing on the hill. I could see her hands and they were shaking, and she was pleading for help from me. She sounded so desperate. So I thought, we have to do something. We can't just sit and wait. I told my friend that we needed to do something. My friend replied that we're praying. In my heart, I knew that that was not enough and that there was something more, but I didn't know what that was. But I did think I'm going to try to find the answer. So I told her, I think we need to be doing something beyond prayers. And my friend was suspicious. She was like, and what would that be? Because she wanted to approve any idea that I had. I didn't know, and I hadn't met Kathryn yet. So I was thinking to myself, now what do I do? And what have I gotten myself into, whether I meant to or not? So as the person who had been on the other side in paradise, half of me was saying, I'm not worried about this. She's in a good place. I personally was not entirely panicked. But certainly my experience on the other side was a good experience. But I'm trying to understand what has gone wrong in this situation. Instinctively, just as a woman, I started kind of realizing that something has gone wrong. And I start resourcing to the universe. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but kind of saying, I don't know what I need to do. I don't know who needs to walk in my life. I don't know who needs to call me on the phone. I don't know who needs to open the door with the answer, but I need help. And I can't do this on my own. So I was looking to the universe, kind of like saying, God, help me. And a few days later, I was working and I was kind of listening to the television in the background, like some of my listeners do. On this day, there was a talk show that was on. And I stopped and started paying attention, which is really rare for me because I'm so focus driven. And the TV just felt like it was calling me. And I stopped and I went and sat in front of it. And I started listening to it and kind of said, okay, what is it? There was an older lady talking about spirit and the afterlife. And I was shocked and I froze and I started listening to every single word that she said. Maybe she had the answer. When the show was over, I called the station. You could do that in those days. And I asked for her name and her phone number. Her name was Hazel Denning, and I got her phone number. And a few days later, when I called her, she gave me the phone number of Kathryn Leeman, and I made an appointment. And on that afternoon, it was a cold and dreary day when I walked up to her door. I stopped and I kind of looked out at the sky and the clouds, and I thought, what would be behind this door for me? What other surprises am I going to run into today that I don't have right now? And what other maybe strange things might happen? But I said, I just have to do this. And I knocked on her door and she answered.
And it was nice to meet you. And I still, to this day, remember the terrified look on your face. You look like what they call a deer in headlights.
I bet. My legs were shaking. I admit it.
Yep. However, I invited you in and you came down and sat in the big blue chair.
You know, she has this really amazingly comfortable chair that just invites you to just open your mouth and just like spill your guts.
It's a magic chair. Yeah.
It really is a magic chair. I sat down in this really comfortable magic chair and opened my mouth, and my story just kind of came rolling out of me. And when I got done, I half expected you to laugh at me because I thought it was a crazy story, and I just met you. I don't know who you are, and you have to admit it was a crazy story.
It may have sounded like a crazy story to you, but not to me, because I've pretty much heard it all. So
I bet you have.
every kind of spirit story you can think of. Yeah.
Well, I sat down and I was serious and I looked her straight in the eye and I said, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what the problem is. Something is disconnected and I need your help and she needs your help. And she hasn't gone to wherever I went when I was on the other side in the afterlife. And I don't know where she's at.
And I remember telling you, I think she was earthbound.
Whoa, mind is blown. I was like, excuse me? What do you mean, earthbound? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. And then I explained that sometimes when a soul is supposed to leave, there may be an unresolved issue and they feel like they're not ready to leave. Or sometimes they don't even recognize that they have left their body because maybe it was so sudden, like a car accident or something. And what happens is they get stuck into this frequency in a particular dimension and they don't know where to go. They don't know how to cross over. They don't know that they're even earthbound. They just are trying to communicate and can't understand why their loved ones, particularly, someone's not communicating back. So that's when they try to get someone's attention that they know can go and find somebody to help. And that's how you ended up in my office.
Mm-hmm. You were the psychic person I needed to provide a safe place for me to tell you my big story and my big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to admit, I was shocked that you knew what I was talking about. Maybe you were as crazy as I was, okay?
I'll agree with that.
And I could not imagine ever in my life up to that moment that someone could be stuck here on Earth. I had not that experience at all. And I thought, oh my goodness, this knowledge, I am forever changed. To this day, actually.
Do you know who it is that crossed over? I think I remember asking you that question, if you knew who the person was, because sometimes people come to me and they don't know who the person was. Let's think about the people who may have passed away. If it was a family member, do you have any idea that we can possibly figure this out?
You know, when you said that to me, I thought, who could it be? And the first person that came to mind for me was my grandfather. He had passed away a few years ago, but I think of him pretty frequently. But as soon as I said it and it came out of my mouth, I knew that it was wrong. And then I thought about the experience that my friend's mom was having. And I said, well, my friend's mom has passed away. And as I said it, the hairs on my arms and on my head, everything began to vibrate. And I had this unusual, brand new chill that I'd never had before go through me. And I realized it was definitely her. I could almost reach out and touch her. She felt so close.
So, can you feel her? Where is she?
Oh, I can feel her. She is standing behind me because she is afraid of you.
That happens often. A lot of times I'll ask, where do you feel she is right now? Because it confirms what I'm seeing. And I could see her right behind you, behind the chair. So I know you were completely tuned into her, and that's why she came to you. I thought it was an interesting experience for you when you had had absolutely no experience in this area whatsoever. So tell the listeners how that felt.
Oh my goodness. For those of you who had your very first spiritual experience, it's scary. But it kind of feels like, you know, when you walk into a room and you can tell that there's somebody in there, but it's actually an empty room. And you have a feeling that somebody else is in there, because you just feel that presence. For me, it was like that, but to a much bigger degree. I could kind of feel her almost pushing against my back and having a fight or flight kind of feeling of fear, almost like I could read her mind. And I said, what do I do?
And at that point, I remember telling you we needed to help her. I just want to point out what you're describing is also not only someone who's earthbound, it sometimes can be a ghost. That's a little different. An earthbound entity and a ghost are two different subjects. She was an earthbound spirit, which does not mean she was bad or evil. There are different types of earthbound spirits, and because you could feel her so strongly, and because you could sense her when you walked into the room, you could feel the hair rising up and all of that. That's how we knew. So I told you that I need to do a deep guided meditation with you. Can you remember what that was like, that particular experience was for you and how you were able to help her?
I do. And it was a really nerve-wracking experience for me having my very first deep guided meditation, because I never had that experience before. And I was not very good at it at all. At least I didn't think so. And I didn't want to fail. So I basically started telling you what I was seeing. And I was seeing her in that moment, similar to the dream where she was asking for help. I let you know that she's just here asking for help.
And I said, do you see a light around you, around her? What did you see?
I could see a light, and I could see the light of the afterlife as well. It was like two different lights, and the light was getting brighter and brighter. And I realized it was the light of God. And I remembered that from my own death experience from an earlier episode.
So we had to invite her to go to the light and see how she reacts.
She didn't like that very much. So she is hiding her eyes, and she didn't want to look at the light. She was afraid of what the light might mean and what would happen to her. She seemed to have this idea or thought that any minute something would go wrong, and poof, she would be in a worse situation than she was currently in. So she didn't trust either of us at that point, and she didn't want to see the light.
Well, what we're going to have to do is show her that this is going to be an absolutely wonderful experience of her moving into the light. She can also see that there are other family members that are waiting in the light that have already crossed over, her parents perhaps, or whomever, and just imagine that they're standing there waiting to greet her and see how she does with that.
She doesn't like it. It's an immediate negative response from her, and she doesn't know what to do. And honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, why do I get to even be involved in her decision making? Shouldn't I just be like, just bringing her to you and then it's going to get fixed on its own? Why do I have to even make a decision here? I actually was kind of a little frustrated with you that I was getting volunteered to kind of help her make a decision.
Well, do you want her to stay with you, or do you want her to go to the light?
Well, she needs to go to the light. She can't stay with me in theory. That would be bad, right?
Right.
But I can hear a voice like in my head, which, listeners, by the way, even though you don't speak the same language here on Earth, on the other side, the frequency you understand. So I could understand her frequency and what she was trying to show me. And I could feel her saying that she would be good. If you will let me stay, I will be good. And it began to play on repeat over and over. I will be good. I will be good. While I was sitting there talking to you. And I remember just looking at you like, what's going to happen here?
And at that point, your session was over.
Boy, I was not a happy person at that moment. I snapped back to reality, and I think I literally said to you, what? An hour has passed? I just sat down. It's been moments. Now what do I do? I can't think straight with the voice pleading in my head. I'm exhausted, and you're telling me I need to leave?
Well, your next session will be in 2 weeks. And at that time, we need to decide what really needs to be done. And perhaps during that time, you will be able to communicate with her to help her say goodbye to her family members or say something to them that she wants or needs to say. It'll come to you just like it did here in this room. You'll be able to hear her and you'll be able to give messages if that's what needs to happen. So let's give it a couple of weeks. I don't sense any danger for her or for you. And then come back, and at that time, I think she'll be ready to go.
And poor Grace was shell-shocked. It was like she was giving me commands from the grave. And I left. I just walked out your door in a daze.
It is interesting because sometimes spirits get stuck like that and they don't want to go to the light because they're terrified of a couple of things. Like they'll never see their family members again here on Earth. Or there's some kind of punishment because of their religious background or whatever, that they haven't been perfect enough and therefore, they're afraid of going to hell or whatever, purgatory, whatever their religious beliefs are. And they're terrified of being punished. So that's why they get oftentimes so stuck here.
Well, as I drove, I realized that what you just said made a lot of sense, and it was very true. And I could see in her mind that when she passed over at that moment, as she departed her body, the thing you said was happening. From her religion, she was taught that a certain thing happens when you die. And that's not what was happening at all. And that's when she kind of reached back out at the last second and called my name in panic, despair, like, save me, do something for me. And in retrospect now, I think that people that have had near-death experiences kind of have an open door of sorts, or I always say a sign over my head that says, I'm a safe place to reach out to. Didn't know it at that time, but now I sort of do. When she got on the other side, nothing was happening right. She fell into a situation where she was really alone and there was nobody to help her. Nobody was listening to her. She's going to different family members, goes to her daughters. Surely her daughters would understand, and they didn't hear her. And she went to her sons, and her sons didn't listen to her either, and her friends. And that darned light kept following her around, and she refused to look at it. And then she started going to people's dreams, going in their dreams and reaching her hands out. She was learning that she could move around and she could do things on the other side. And going in the dreams were not helping at all. She did not realize why. But in a sense, I started thinking that she was kind of haunting everybody. Even though that's not what she was trying to do, the more she wanted to communicate her problem, the worse matters got. I could kind of see these things unfolding like pictures in my mind. And I realized Kathryn was right. Why would she stay here? Because she was so afraid. The way that she was taught, her religion was very specific about what happens. And she was afraid of that. This idea of going into the light wasn't something that she had been taught. She was afraid of the next step. She was afraid of the light. And I kind of tried to ignore her, and I drove home. She was kind of like a little sidecar beside me. And I went back to my house.
Do you remember what your experience was like for the 2 weeks with her hanging around?
Oh boy, oh boy. That's an entire episode by itself, I think. You know, her voice was still playing in my head, I will be good. And it played all the time. In the middle of the night, if I woke up, if I was asleep, if I was cooking, driving, didn't matter what I was doing, it was on replay continuously. And when I paid attention to it, it had more energy. I just felt it was very nerve-wracking. So it was really exhausting for me to be listening to her. But I noticed I began to kind of emulate her. She always wore a headscarf, and that was her trademark. And then I began to wear a headscarf. I began to understand some basic Arabic and the other languages that she spoke. She knew a couple, and I would find myself listening to conversations and responding with a yes or no. It was like she was making herself a permanent place inside of my head, as if she had moved into my personality. I don't speak those languages, but they felt more and more comfortable, less foreign to me. And I found myself more frequently nodding yes or no. She was an amazing cook, and I was driven to cook every meal. And I can cook, but not like her. And I wish there was a way for me to have captured those recipes inside of my head because they're lost recipes at this point, and I would have really loved to record them all. I was at a point I had to start calling in sick to work because I was not able to concentrate enough to do my job. And she wanted to pray all day long. She wanted to kind of solve this problem on her own. If I was given a choice, all day I would just sit and pray. And it was a very challenging period of time for me because I felt like I don't know what's going on, but I felt invaded by her personality, and it was not natural to me. And I wanted to come back to be myself. So I wanted to call you early and say, 2 weeks is too long. I need to come in earlier. I need to get back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to share that when an earthbound spirit stays too long, they get attached to the person. And then they begin to influence on someone's personality, almost like a possession. That's the difference between an attachment and a possession. An attachment is on the outside. The possession is more on the inside. You feel it on the inside, where they begin to take over thoughts. These days, I can actually see with my biofeedback machines the thought patterns. So it will actually pick up 2 brainwave patterns. And therefore, I then send frequencies to the extra brainwave pattern and send them into more of a different situation so they're no longer attached. It doesn't harm them. They're just no longer attached. So I know when there's been an attachment too long, you're experiencing a process that will become an actual possession. So that's a little bit different. So that you were getting this attachment and it was influencing you and beginning to take you over. And that's what was taking place.
I definitely was being influenced. There's no doubt about that. The voice I had in my head was becoming louder, actually, as the time went on. And the night before I came to you, I don't think I slept the entire night because her voice had gotten so loud. And when I arrived at your office, I felt like the weight of her was like on me. And as soon as I sat down in your presence, I felt like you knew what was going on and that you would know how to fix this thing. And I really didn't know the process then. I didn't know the steps or anything like that. but I felt safe in your presence. And I was so thankful to be back with you. And I was just thinking, thank goodness you're here, because I don't know what we're doing and I need your help desperately.
And I told you it will be okay just to sit down and try to relax. And I needed to ask you if your family members noticed anything different about you.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That's because that's another sign of an attachment. If your family can also see something that's going on, then you know you are not alone.
They did. I was dressing in a different way. I was doing different things. I had little kids at the time, and everyone was staring at mom, kind of wondering, what is wrong with mom? They all noticed a big change in me.
In that 2-week time frame, had you shared any of this with your friend whose mom was with you?
I tried. I hinted to my friend, but she really was not so receptive. I went around the edge of the problem, kind of like fringe, and I thought if she's open to what I'm trying to say, I would. It would have. It would have been a really good opportunity for her, I thought, but she didn't see that as an opportunity at all. She actually felt like I was trying to do something that could harm her mom. So she panicked and she said, "Don't do anything, just stand down." And I thought maybe mom is visiting her a little bit too. Like maybe like a gang of them now is going to tell me to stay out of it. The family felt like they knew how to handle it and they were working on it. And, but still every morning, people were calling each other saying, "Darn it, mom is still here." And I realized that mom didn't necessarily trust me to solve her problem. So she was independently still actively looking for a solution to fix this issue. And she was using me kind of like a temporary home base.
Do you think she's still with you? I asked you.
At that time, definitely, I could feel her standing behind me. And I can feel her pushing really hard into me as if she's trying to really hold on to me.
So I remember guiding you to do a visualization that the top of the ceiling was opening up and that the light of God that you were familiar with is going to stream down into this room. And I want you to tell me what your experience is.
I closed my eyes and visualized that the ceiling was opening up. And for a brief moment, I'm telling you, the ceiling opened up and I was standing in the light of God, a light that I recognized and the frequency that I recognized, and instantly it mesmerized me. My mind was just fixed on the splendor and the beauty, and it radiated through me. And I had to kind of gasp because I hadn't seen it in a long time since my near death experience. And I really didn't realize how much I missed the light of God, and I needed it at that moment.
So then I had you cut all ties with her and invite her to just look at the light, just for a little quick peek.
As I looked into the light, I immediately saw heads popping up in my mind. 5 or 6 or 7 silhouettes of heads just popping up. I could feel her hands moving around to the front of my shoulder. And then before I could even say anything, before I could invite her to do anything, she recognized those people. She knew who they were, and they were calling her. They were inviting her to come with them. And in that moment, she decided that she was leaving and she took off. And there were some attachments that were still there, maybe deeper than we anticipated. And even though we had cut them, it was really intense. It just felt like something was getting completely ripped off of me. Like a giant piece of tape was just getting ripped right off of me. And I almost wanted to cry, but I just had met you, so I couldn't cry. But it did hurt so bad. And I could see her just shooting up to the light and hugging everybody. There was a great family reunion going on right in front of my eyes. So joyous. And the whole loving group left into the light, and the ceiling kind of closed up, and it was over.
So, just so you know, those attachments that you felt, other than her, they send out little tentacles to actually attach themselves to the aura of the other person. So you were feeling her and perhaps the others, but she was the predominant one. And when she left, she still had some cords, because we had learned since that time, so long ago, say 30 years ago, that when she left, it ripped those remaining cords right out of you, which is why it hurt. And then you were exhausted when she left, because you got to realize how much energy she was siphoning off of you to keep yourself going, and the form that she was in. It's what they call the vampire experience. She really was planning to stay. And so this is why it's so important people begin to know that if they have an attachment and appropriate new ways to let go of it, it needs to be done, because it's healthy for you and for the other person who is the attachment.
It was an exhausting experience. I was thankful to be in your safe office and your lovely, comfortable blue chair, because I probably would have fell down onto the ground because I was so exhausted.
So I remember telling you when you were getting ready to leave first that you needed to walk around a little bit to get grounded, have a drink of water, and make sure that you were back in your body, and pay attention to your hands and your feet, and just reacclimate yourself to your own body, and to drive slowly, and to just keep repeating, I am grace all the way home, to make sure that all of your energy is fully back from the energy she had taken from you. And you needed to go home and sleep, rest, let your body get rejuvenated, because it's really hard on the adrenals when someone goes through this. You got to experience those first baby steps with spirit, and I got to share it with you. And I think that whole experience paved the way for your journey with Clovistia.
You know, I agree with you with that. And when you were telling me to keep saying, I am grace, I did kind of become aware that I had been displaced out of my body, and I needed to kind of command it to be mine again. That sounds weird, but I went back home and I was really tired. I actually felt sick and I went to bed. There was nobody around me, like in my circle of trust, that I could go to and vent to and say, hey, this is just what happened to me. I may need to have some support from you or something. There wasn't. There was just me. And I really wasn't sure what the next steps might be, what else might show up. But the next morning when I woke up, I got some phone calls, and an amazing thing happened overnight. The friend let me know that mom had came back to her, and she visited her, and she was very happy, and she was smiling. She was saying, thank you so much. And she was holding flowers, and she was telling her that she was okay. And mom had went and visited other family members as well the same night to say that she was okay. Later that day, they called me and they said, come on over, we're having a pizza party. And I thought, okay, I'm excited. I want to get all the details about mom. And when I got there, they were so excited, and they were hugging each other, and they were saying that their prayers had worked and that they had saved mom. for me, I was just okay. I was happy. I didn't care who took the credit for it, even though I sort of felt like I needed a little bit of cred there. But it was an affirmation that the unknown and unseen actually was real, and that there was possibilities that I had never thought about. And my mind was again kind of blown that this was not my imagination. This wasn't a hallucination. This was a bunch of people all having the same experience and a result from that experience. And it was absolutely real.
Yes, and you got to witness how real it was, because here they were celebrating and they had no idea what you had done.
Yes, it was a secret.
Yeah, that's a pretty big step into the beginning of your spiritual journey.
I appreciate that. I do feel that that awakened the seed inside of me, that by helping the entire family was a really big jump for me. I am thankful that you were there to help me accomplish that, and that we were able to help her, move on in the afterlife. And it helped her children have some peace, which was really apparent after that, because they went back to normal lives and they stopped having that negative experience repeated with mom.
And so what I want to say to you, job well done. So how long did it take you to get back to feeling like yourself?
Oh, you know, um, I mean, I felt better from one sense. In one way, I felt better because I knew that she had departed, and I knew that in theory I was healthy again, because I did previously feel spiritually unhealthy, and I felt really unwell. But now I was feeling much better, kind of really normal, sort of whatever the new normal was, because I came back and I personally needed the next step for me. That was not enough. I found out that there's therapy and whatever the heck happened, and I wanted to know more.
And we began working on filling up all those holes with lots of light and color and sound, and putting you in protective bubbles and getting you into some tip-top shape. And that way your energy could stay within yourself and not bleed out, because that's why you got so exhausted. And I think that was helping you to get back on track so you could start making decisions. So we needed to put you into a protective bubble so your energy would continue to stay within yourself and not bleed out. And I think that was helping you get back on track and let all of your chakras come back into balance and harmony. And what I really wanted you to understand, that it's not really healthy to be a conduit for somebody like that because of the vampirical aspect of it, but you can communicate with them and they can stay outside and they can talk to you, but never to take attachment like that. And so learning how to not be an open door was what we began to work on.
Yeah, I definitely needed help in that area. Obviously, we're dealing with Clovistia now, who definitely came in and took over whatever was left of me.
Right.
And that's exactly what you did for me. So you filled me up with white light to capacity. And when it would have a little leak, you would fill that place again. And so I eventually became like a giant water bubble of white light, which feels so good, physically and mentally. It healed me. The hole that had been created from all of her emotions, where it's all sealed up, and I began to feel like I was kind of ready to move on. I was ready to continue this spiritual journey that I found myself on. I can look back on it now and I realize that it, like you said, it really was the first steps of inviting Clovistia into my life.
I think you passed the test for Clovistia. And I want to thank you for your willingness to share your experience today, and Clovistia as well, encouraging you to do that. I do have a feeling that somebody out there just heard this and it might really make a difference for them.
Me too. Well, listeners, until next time, share your frequency. Thank you to all of our listeners. If you have enjoyed our frequency journey today, please share it with your family and friends. Make sure to visit us at clovistia.com, or you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, where we have about 1 million followers over there. Until next time, please share your frequency.